Thanks for checking out my video. If you want to learn more from me, I have a lot of classes on Udemy. You can find the links to a lot of those in the description.
So I don't know if you have heard of this or not, or the concept anyway, but today I wanted to talk about thought forms. So thought forms are thought of, pun intended, as basically, all right, our thoughts are energy, and that energy can take form and influence us, right? So, I mean, one of the things that I could think of and extrapolate to, sorry, I'm getting a drink at the same time I'm doing this, but one of the things that I can think of and extrapolate to is there was this TV show called A Haunting, right? And there was a woman that was living in this house with her family, and she had a lot of like repressed PTSD and stuff from abuse. And what came to pass was that the house became haunted by something, and basically the repressed emotions and the repressed anger actually manifested itself as an external force that then basically acted like a poltergeist. Now, can thought forms do this kind of thing? Arguably, yes. But is that the case for the majority of them? No. Basically, thought forms are one of the things that you can relate them to is schemas. Now, my bachelor's is in psych, so I might get a little wordy with this stuff, but I'm going to try to break it down for you. So, a schema is like a reinforced idea, and it's something that's built in your mind. So, the first time that you're a little kid and you see a dog, you're like, "Oh, what's that?" Your dad says, "It's a dog." And then you look at all the characteristics and stuff and you say, "Oh, it's got 4 legs and a tail, and it's this size and it's this color and whatever." And then your brain says, "Oh, these characteristics make up this thing." The next time that you see something with 4 legs and a tail, you're like, "Oh, that's a dog." And your dad's like, "No, that's a horse." And then your brain then has to create a new schema for horse, right? It might have 4 legs and a tail, but it looks different with this characteristic, this one, this one, this one, this one. And you can create schemas basically around anything. Like, I have a big schema around guitar, right? Because I know a bunch of different things about guitars and what goes into them and how to play a bunch of different things, what the different knobs are, what the different kind of picks are, how to play on the fretboard, these are the different parts, and yada, yada, yada. Basically, it's a box containing a bunch of different ideas. So you might think of thought forms as advanced schema, or a metaphysical way or a spiritual way of looking at schema, right? So you can have, think of like a bad habit, like an addiction or something. Anything that triggers your desire to engage in that thing, whether it's like coffee or, a cigarette or whatever, or a drink or whatever, anything that might trigger your desire or want to have that thing, whether it's a certain time of day, a particular stressor, a particular thought, or whatever, that connects to that idea of, oh man, I need a fix, or whatever, that's a schema for one, and it can take form as a thought form if we're talking metaphysically. So basically, have you ever been in situations where you find a lot of repetitive thoughts that happen? Of course, 90% of our thoughts every day are the same thing, and they are reinforced by these thought forms. So even the ideas of, I'll never be successful at this, I shouldn't try this because this is what always happens. Every time that I get in a relationship, this happens. Every time that, you could even, like, if you have trauma from like a car accident or something, you can have a very well-developed schema or thought form around anxiety about driving in cars or driving on the highway or driving at night, things like that. And then these thought forms can influence you to make decisions. And it almost feels like an external or even an internal oppression or force that kind of keeps you within the same thought patterns, and thus makes it more difficult for you to break out of those things. You ever have, you might even have a thought form of, man, every Saturday at work sucks, right? Then what's going to happen? The thought form, or the schema, or whichever way you want to look at it, will then influence the way that you think about every single thing that goes on every Saturday to make you look at everything that happens as a sucky thing. You know, even if, let's say, you get out early on a Saturday. Well, I dealt with a bunch of these customers and not, this happened, and it was all a pain in the butt. Whereas if you had a thought form or a schema around, I can have a good day at work, right? Then what are you going to look at? That thought form / schema is then going to be influencing you to look at all the positives that are going on. I had like the first half of my shift felt really, really fast. I had a nice relaxing break. I had some good chatting with some customers. I got a lot of projects done, whatever it might be. These thought forms, in a way, kind of influence our subconscious thinking and our conscious thinking to lean it towards one thing or another, one way of looking at something or another, or one way of acting or another. So we can, there's a technique that I read in a book a long time ago. I don't even remember which book it was, but it was the Identify, Objectify, Banish technique. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, the IOB technique, where you identify this particular thought or something that you have. You think about it and say, okay, why is this thing wrong? It's because of A, B, C, and D. And then you banish it with that particular thought pattern, that thought form, that schema. I don't want it anymore, and you deny it. And every time it comes up, you deny it some more. Because every time that we have a thought that we don't like, we can immediately replace it with a replacement thought, and therefore you're chipping away and killing off that particular thought form. Now, you can have thought forms for both good things and bad things. Like, people that always seem to be cheerful all the time. I have a couple of neighbors like that. They're constantly smiling and whatever. Really seems like nothing ever gets them down, right? Why? Because they've built up a really, really large self-concept and schemas around themselves and their actions in their daily life. And then the energetics being the way that they can influence the different things around them, the way that they think, the way that even events and whatnot happen. These thought forms then influence everything that happens around them to be more positive, or at least be seen in a positive light. Now, if you see everything is positive and you're blind to the negative, of course, that's spiritual bypass. But we can definitely get into spiritual bypass in another video / episode, right? But what we really want to think about is, what are the different things that we are thinking? What if those thoughts can, how much influence do they really have over us? Because the idea behind thought forms is that they definitely do. And then what can we do about them to eliminate them and lessen them? And if you can create such powerful thoughts that then influence yourself and the different events around you, then you got to think about, what can you consciously create? Because we're creating all these different thoughts and energies and then creating those situations without thinking about it. So what can we actually intentionally create in order to make events and our days and our lives ultimately go the way that we want? Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this one, and what kind of thought forms do you guys think you have that might be influencing your everyday life? Let me know. Good hunting.